I welcome the viewers on behalf of Sansad TV to the episode of Constitution Chronicles, the one destination revisiting the Constitution of India. Constitution, a living document of the ones who sacrificed their lives building this robust nation that stands at a plethora of cultures, traditions, aspirations and dream. समाज का एक दर्पण देश की विशेषताएं और प्रासंगिकता को जो कड़ी बांध कर रखती है वही संविधान कहलाती है। आज इसी संविधान को गहराई से समझने का प्रयास करेंगे। My name is Avinash Gautam. I am a student of Hindu College, University of Delhi, the host and producer of today's episode. Along with me, there exist some great minds in this room. Let's get to know them.
Thank you very much, Avinash, for your wonderful compliment. I can only hope to live up to the standards implicit in such praise. My name is Pushkar Pandey. I hail from Kolkata. I am currently a third year student of history at Hindu College, University of Delhi. And my primary interests lie in Iron Age South Asian history as well as the economic, intellectual and political history of the early modern period.
Very well, sir. Very well, sir.
Many thanks, Avinash, for having me in the podcast. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. My name is Swam Ranjan and I'm a student of Aryabat College, University of Delhi. Currently, I'm in my second year for Political Science Honours. My interest includes Indian polity, the topic of discussion today, the Constitution, as well as analysing the different domestic political scenarios in the country. That's all from my end.
Our Constitution as an instrument acts as an apparatus in the state politics and particularly modern in their provenance, or they always have been an indispensable part of our complex civil polities.
Well, you see, one of the debates in when we trace the intellectual history of concepts like constitutions is whether they were constructed consciously at some stage in the recent past, or whether in framing such texts there was a long established tradition. So, for instance, this applies even to nations, by the way. So, you have Benedict Anderson, who says that nations are an imagined community. But then you have some scholars who will say that, at least in the European context, they have argued that the distinct national character is something that originated in medieval times. For instance, you had the Carolingians and in a certain part of France, and then you had the Holy Roman Empire and other states in those contexts which define the national character. So, this is a very interesting question, and I don't think there can be a definite answer that will satisfy everyone. But I will certainly take the stance that the two aspects that you have talked about, in the sense that constitutions also explicitly define how administration is to be done. So, if you remember, and I'll try to qualify some of my statements in my previous response by responding to this. But as far as administrative apparatus and its definition goes and its boundaries go, in pre-modern contexts, the locality. So there's this always has been this dichotomy between the state and the locality, the state and the village community, the state and the town. So one may debate whether this distinction is valid, but let's not get into that. I believe that in pre-modern contexts, states simply weren't that pervasive. And this is why, if you remember, I said that to overcome feudalism, what do you need? You need a strong state. So you people wanted reforms. And how would, for instance, could we really increase the age of marriage if we didn't have a state? Because there was a lot of resistance to it from all segments of society. So, in this respect, if we look at reforms in the 19th century, it is clear that they were not based on any constitution of any kind, but they were largely based on customs. So, customs were so when the Britishers came, they did have Pandits and Maulvis translate the religious scriptures of both Hindus and Muslims to engage better in administration. But what people also need to note is that they found a lot of deviations. So I do think that one could say that there were proto-constitutions of some kind, but I think constitutions are distinct, and even as far as codification goes, it's very recent that we have codified all administrative principles together.
That is very much true. And what you have said about the age of marriage and having all those reforms, particularly if we talk about the first amendment of the Indian Constitution, where we were given more aspects of how we could implement the land reforms and have the equal share of the society, since we are a socialist nation that talks about a concept of a welfare state. So it is very much important to have a body like Constitution that can define all the rights and the directives of principles that can a state government or a central government can implement to ensure that every stakeholder of the society is getting his rights secured. Very much true. Swam, the same question. What do you feel about the same?
Right. It was quite lovely hearing what Pushkar sir said, and I would like to just emphasize on the two words. So the ideals and the administration. Right. When we talk about ideals, we see that when Pushkar sir talked about the Holy Roman Empire, right? There were codifications such as in the 12 tables, Juris Civilis, right? All these things I think are even right now. Because when 12 tables were written down as a written law, right, how can one be, administered by law? We see today, we see in BNS. Earlier it was IPC, erstwhile IPC. When it comes to administration, a lot of theories have been there. And administration in particular, if we see, then the Great Charter, the Magna Carta, right? One of those things we have in the fundamental rights known as the Magna Carta of Indian Constitution. But in 1215, when the United Kingdom came up with that particular thing, the Great Charter, right? So, limiting the powers of the king, right? So, I think these things are inculcated in the Constitution. They have drawn inspiration. Different constitutions have drawn inspiration from them, right? As Pushkar sir again mentioned, as you mentioned, they have definitely adapted themselves to the current environment, right? The current situation. But in my views, the ideals are very much the same. The ideal of democracy in different constitution, the ideal of even not equality, like the term equality has definitely progressed over the years. Expanding it to women, to third gender people, different people. So yeah, but anyways, I think. However, the other ideals in particular, they were there from the very starting. So, the Constitution even today reflects those very ideas.
Completely agreed. Since you mentioned about the fundamental rights, the Magna Carta of the Indian Constitution, they are called negative rights. In a way, as you said, that we have to protect the rights of the citizens, of the stakeholders from the king. That is why हमारे संविधान में भी fundamental rights part 3 are considered as a negative right, not a positive right. क्यों? Because वो power limit कर रहा है state की. That is the same scenario. Very well, lovely listening to you. चलिए अब शायद बहुत जटिल मुद्दा होते जा रहे हैं. Let's talk about something very substantial. Presently present in all the smartphones we see today. We see all the Gen Zs. This inverted comma, quote unquote, the scenario of Gen Z. This term Gen Z has been developed so far. We all are having phones, Instagrams, Facebooks, and God knows what not. So in this modern generation, where Gen Zs are very much talked about, what are the psychological impacts of the Indian Constitution on the present day's Gen Z? And how does this present generation looks at the holy book of the Indian democracy, that is the Constitution?
Very well, Avinash. You see, this question in particular, first of all, I'd like to clarify that the Gen Z generation, including us, I won't say unfortunately or fortunately that I am a part of the Gen Z, but the Instagram, the different modes of communication which has developed over the years. First of all, I think every Gen Z, right, either through any different site on Instagram, I won't take the name, but any different site, they look at the Constitution from that very source, right? So I think in a very positive sense, it's a great thing that has evolved, because now people are more aware about the Constitution, more aware about the rights. I will tell you one small example, right? Yesterday I was having a discussion with with a friend of mine, and we were discussing about the right to forget. Right. So under Article 21, when there is a right to privacy, so the world is right now debating where there should be a right to forget or not.
Very much true.
Right. Something you search on the internet, right? You don't want that thing to show up, but that thing is again showing up again and again. I mean, whatever times, however many number of times you search for that particular thing.
The digital footprint that you were talking about.
Yeah, a digital footprint, right? So that is there. So now the world is debating on right to forget, and the world, who is the world? The youth. The youth are debating. I don't think that people who are in the age group of 60, 70, they are very much into social medias and all. So the youth are discussing whether we should have that thing or not.
And as a matter of fact, people who use Facebook
Right.
are considered the part of the millennium generation.
Exactly.
Boomers, what
Exactly.
many people call them.
So I think it's having a very positive impact. Even the right to privacy, when K.S. Puttaswamy judgment happened in 2017, the Shreya Singhal case happened actually, striking down of 66A of the IT Act. Right? These are the things youth took it very positively. Youth realized their rights, and that is how they took it to the court. Then the court actually realized that this particular thing is wrong, which has been coming over from the years, and they rectified it. So youth is playing a very important role, and the psychological impact of the constitution is very positive on the youth these days, because they are aware that what the state can do, what the state cannot do. So I think indeed very positive impact.
Right. And in this digital era, जब हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री भी बात करते हैं भारत को एक नई राह देने के लिए, we have to bring the country on the web,
right,
on the globe, on the forum that every individual can understand and seek the knowledge prima facie.
right.
And you mentioned about Shreya Singhal as well. तो right to internet का concept भी under the ambit of Article 21, it has been explained by the Honorable Supreme Court and the High Courts. अनुराधा वसीम का एग्जाम्पल ले लीजिए आप, अनुराधा वसीम वर्सेस यूनियन ऑफ इंडिया, जब बात की गई कि राइट टू इंटरनेट should also be a fundamental right. Very well said.
I would just add one thing to it, that who would have imagined that right to internet will constitute a right under right to life in
That's
Article
true.
21 of the Constitution. That is happening now. So a lot of other things will be inculcated in this very dimension, and I think all thanks to the youth and the Constitution in particular.
युवा शक्ति.
Yeah.
पुष्कर जी, क्या आपका विचार है?
Well, I would like to slightly temper this tone of optimism because you see, the term Gen Z is a temporal term. So it only is based on your age, the age bracket. And no generation is homogeneous. We are still a very heterogeneous country. So my concern is a privileged Gen Z, member of the Gen Z, who studies at a posh school, who has access not just to the internet, but has the capacity, who has networked well enough, or who knows what to find and what to look for on the internet. Because you see, the term digital divide should not be limited just to who has an internet connection. It is much more than that. Now that right to internet has already become a fundamental right, as you have discussed, we have to expand the ambit. So what I feel is, and this is something that's across the globe as well, there is a tendency for some kind of negative polarization among the youth, wherein they happen to adopt more regressive positions than some of their antecedents, than their preceding generations. Because on the internet, you have people like Andrew Tate, who will go out there and say stuff that really is something that can't be repeated in any polite and decent environment. But you have youth, members of the youth who idolize him, and you can find other counterparts to him in several contexts. But you also find, for instance, a lot of conflicts based on caste on the internet. Just go on Twitter, go on Facebook, and you will see people using slurs and abuses, and it will be very difficult to trace them and find out. So there is this aspect as well. So I think this Whiggish notion of each generation embodying and executing a more progressive and enlightened agenda, drawing upon the achievements of their predecessors, is a very simplistic and I think unduly optimistic view. I think we should not be complacent because of this. We have a lot of work to do, especially as we hold the ambition of making India a developed country in the future.
Very much true, very much true. And the idea of constitution, how I perceive in the modern era of Gen Z, of this digitalized world, I believe constitution is an emotion that every day breathes with 140 crore people every day. And by our forefathers, it has been given a shape of something that is tangible, that you can touch, you can feel, and you can exercise rights out of the same. The history of the constitution is itself very inspiring. अगर हम इतिहास खंगोल कर देखें हमारे संविधान का, इतने जटिल मुद्दे हैं, इतने वाद विवाद वाद विमर्श के मुद्दे हैं, अगर आप उसको पढ़ना बैठेंगे तो आपको पता लगेगा कि संविधान सदन में जो डिबेट्स हुई, जो वार्ता हुई, the level of extent of the knowledge that our forefathers conceived, commendable. And we talk about the history of the Constitution, Regulating Act of 1773 to Indian Independence Act of 1947. More than 190 years of the journey has been witnessed, and the trials and the turbulences are by themselves testament to all the sufferings that our forefathers, our great grand martyrs shed the blood in. Very well.
Just one thing to add, I really don't want to convert the podcast into an argument, but you see, his idea, nothing is absolute, right? So his idea of the Gen Z generation is very right, but one important aspect which makes it very positive even in today's time, a champion of democracy, Abraham Lincoln, said, nearly all men can stand adversity. If you want to test a man's character, give him power. And to limit that very power, you need rights, right? The rights are basically, you need rights to limit those powers. So the right that the individual has. And the youth realizing those individual rights is putting a stop, not putting a stop, but putting restrictions on the exercise of arbitrary powers of the state. So I think that is very much needed in order to have an harmonious balance between the state powers and between the rights of an individual.
Very much agreed. And every coin has two sides, one positive, one negative. And that's what makes this democracy a beautiful one.
Exactly.
Right? We are having all that ambit of freedom of speech and expression as secured under Part 3, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A. Right. Now, we are going to have one more guest with us, and my dear viewers, we are going to break for a minute and we are going to have another guest to develop an idea upon the Constitution and enlighten the thought process of the same. Thank you so much. Stay curious. Welcome back, viewers. Now we are joined with a new guest. And let's get to know more about our guest, Mr. Kaushal Singh.
Hi, thank you so much, Avinash, for having me. A little about myself. I am a newly minted and newly graduated lawyer from Manikchand Pahade Law College, Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar, formerly Aurangabad, Maharashtra. And I do freelance legal work, write about constitution, and work as a research analyst in the Law and Politics Center of a youth-led think tank by the name of Geostrata. It's good to be here. Looking forward towards this lovely interaction which you people are having.
Thank you so much, sir, and it's an honor कि आप हमारे साथ समय निकाल कर यहाँ पर पॉडकास्ट का हिस्सा बनने आए.
Thank you.
सर, जाने से पहले we were discussing about the historical advancements of our Indian Constitution. Since Constitution as an entity has a beautiful and a very motivating history, what do you feel that what actually shaped during the historical advancements, and what were the features involved when we talk about all those events that held together and made this beautiful document?
See, while addressing this question, and if we break this question into two halves, that is before 1947 and after 1947, the two major changes that occurred were the way our colonial rulers interpreted the need for laws or need for quasi-constitutional mechanisms, and the way our founding forefathers, those who won us the independence, the forefathers of the Indian state per se, the way they envisaged the need for laws, the way they envisaged the need for a constitution. Now, starting with the Regulating Act from 1773, which was the first document which of some sort gave a governance structure or a government model to India in the presidency towns. We moved on to the Government of India Act 1858, which happened in light of the first War of Independence of 1857. After that, whatever tool we see which was used, be it the Councils Act 1862, 1833, 1862, then 1891, 93, all of these acts that we see, all of them were nothing more than tools to aid, to assist, and to help the colonial rulers in imposing their will on the Indian state. That's one. Second, we see a lot of dialogue and discussion happening on this fact that, oh, we could not have made the constitution, oh, it was not in our ability, capacity, or in our intellectual temperament to build a constitution for ourselves. And we hear this rabid argument, so to speak, from all across the world over, even though today, 75 years down the line in our Amritkal, we are doing pretty well for ourselves as a constitutional state. And let me give you a couple of examples of how these pre-independence quasi-constitutional ways or mechanisms helped the Britishers, helped the colonial rulers impose their ideas, impose their wills. We see the idea of separate electorates which were introduced in the Councils Act of 1909, also known as the Government of India Act of 1909, or the Parliamentary reforms, and the same were then later again reimposed by the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, the 1919 Government of India Act. What did the separate electorates do? The separate electorates were the most accurate and most divisive means which the colonial rulers could have used to split the Indian society vertically. That's one. B, the second aspect of it is, many of the issues which we as a constitutional state today see are taken up or were given birth to in that era, right? So that constitutional framework that which we have developed post the Motilal Nehru Committee, the report of 1928, which gave the basic idea of a constitution, or of the what we see the Government of India Act 1935, which introduced diarchy, which introduced legislation, which gave us the prerequisite structure of the 7th schedule that we have in the Indian Constitution. All of that could have very well come up if the Indians themselves were at helm. So we don't need any of this teaching, training, or coaxing from the from anyone for that matter, that we could not have done this on our own, because we did it on our own after 1946, after the Cabinet Mission Plan, after the Constituent Assembly of India was created, and until now we have been doing it pretty well, even as we enter the Amritkal in 2024.
Very well said, very well said. And I really loved the part where you mentioned about all the historical advancements. Since the journey against British started since the Battle of Plassey, Robert Clive, the first way that the British got the hold of the country, and since then until 1947, we are somewhere down the line under the jurisdiction of the British regime. It was the wills of this population, of this humble land of Indian subcontinent, that made a nation, the most diverse nation, so to speak, out of the whole globe. Very well. Now, Pushkar sir, what do you feel about the same, and how the historical advancements, since you are yourself a historian, so what are your implications on the same?
Well, to start off, even if we tentatively agree any presumptuous proposition that we gave you the constitution, good, so be it. What does the Rig Veda say? When it says that let noble thoughts come to us from all corners. So I mean, that really the constitution, as we've been discussing so far, purely objectively, based on the merits of the values and the state system and apparatus that it embodies and represents and formalizes, is really deserves all the praise that it gets. There's a reason why it is revered across the board in India, and everyone has to swear an allegiance to it. not just because of the compulsion, but because of the fact that it really is something that represents our national aspiration. So that's in response to when you have arrogant and Eurocentric perspectives that you couldn't have done this without us. I mean, fair enough, but a lot of it doesn't really matter, because the constitution objectively based on what what has happened, especially after 1947. Since you pointed out we have to look at what happened pre-1947 and post-1947 as well. So I think purely on the basis of what we have done post-47 is, I think, testament to what to the fact that that constitution, that the genre of texts as a basis for states isn't really something that is foreign to us. So really, I mean, in this respect, extreme Eurocentrism, but at the same time being an indigenist, in the sense that we ignore the fact that at least the administrative basis is something that evolved through over the period of colonialism. I think both extremes are a case in historical amnesia. A lot of the administrative basis did really emerge during colonialism, but with one difference. We were subjects then. Post 47, we are citizens.
That is true.
And this distinction is something that I think very important.
It indeed has been a roller coaster ride, since we talk about all those things that has shaped the present forum of this country. And tell me if I am wrong, the case that is considered as the jewel of this Indian democracy, the custodian of the Indian democracy, that is none other than Khaan Anand Bti case that happened in 1973. So what do you feel? How Khaan Anand Bti case, which also had the biggest bench in this history of this country. So what are the things that makes Khaan Anand Bti case one of its own kind, and what were the rights of the citizens that were secured under this particular case?
Right. So to understand Khaan Anand Bti case, Khaan Anand Bti versus State of Kerala, 1973, the judgment came on 24th April 1973. Before Khaan Anand Bti case, and if I can, take a couple of minutes and draw out a timeline for our viewers, this entire discussion started from way back from the Constituent Assembly, when this issue came up that we are creating a bundle of rights envisaged and written down under Chapter 3 of the Fundamental Rights. We are also creating certain measures, certain directives, certain governance principles which are to be followed by the government in their day-to-day activities, which were the directive principles of the state policy under Chapter 4. And we are also giving certain other legal rights, certain other rights to the state, and so on and so forth. So where does the state intervene? Where does the state not intervene? That was the first question. The second question was, till what extent can the state meddle in or can change the structure, the face value, the ethos, the principles and the philosophy of the constitution and everything that is written inside it. And from there on, this story started with the first case being the Shankari Prasad Deo versus Union of India, 1950-51, wherein the Supreme Court in a smaller bench interpreted that no, the Parliament can intervene when it comes to amending the fundamental rights. Thereon, again, this discussion came up almost a decade and a half later in the IC Golaknath versus State of Punjab case, later IC Golaknath versus Union of India in 1967, wherein it was stated that the Parliament cannot amend the Chapter 3 of the Constitution, and therein for the very first time the word basic structure, the phraseology of basic structure, was used in a judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court. From 1967 to 1973, if we look at the socio-political conditions of the country, the economic conditions of the country, we see a lot of swings being taken place from the 1971 war, then to a rapid change and a rapid downturn in the country's economic scenarios. So therein the Honorable Court also took it into consideration that even though we are on a economic sticky wicket with a majority government in place, the court became very conservative when it came to understanding, interpreting and analyzing the Constitution. So all of this shaped the judgment, the 1073 page judgment of the Keshav Anand Bharti versus State of Kerala case. The judgment came on 24th April 1973. So now what does the judgment say? The Keshav Anand Bharti judgment first of all the premise of this was land reforms. The premise of this was Article 31A, 31B, 31C, again under Chapter 3 of the Fundamental Rights, even though all these three articles which I just mentioned are directly not related to fundamental rights. They are more or less of saving clauses, that is to save the structure, the laws which have already been created by the Parliament from they not infringing or they infringing upon the fundamental rights. Now, the judgment basically said was that anything that has the ability to infringe the basic structure of the Constitution will be reviewed. That's one. And what would be the basic structure? The next question which the court answered, what was the basic structure? The basic structure of the Constitution is something that is untouchable, that is completely sacrosanct, and that is completely out of bounds from the Parliament's ability to cut, sever, eclipse or amend. So basically, basic structure of the Constitution is the first wall of defense within the Constitution that the Parliament cannot touch, which controls the arbitrariness or the high-handedness of the executive or of the legislature. And the second thing which was said was that laws outside the 9th schedule laws inside the 9th schedule, they will, apart from them, anything and everything will be under the Supreme Court's or any other constitutional court's purview to review and to accordingly check its validity vis-a-vis the Constitution.
Just for the benefits of the just for the benefit of the viewers, what is actually 9th schedule and how does it protect some rights of the government or the citizens? What is it?
So basically 9th schedule is अगर उसको 9th schedule के पीछे की लॉजिक को देखा जाए, उसके रैशनल को देखा जाए, तो 9th schedule की कहानी भी शंकरी प्रसाद देव के जजमेंट के साथ ही चालू हुई. शंकरी प्रसाद देव 1950 में आया. 1951 में हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में पहला संशोधन किया गया, फर्स्ट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट एक्ट 1951. That was the abolition of zamindari land reforms, which were a pet project of the founding fathers like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, like Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and even was a Gandhian directive, so to speak. Now, what happened was that incessantly the laws which were put in the 9th schedule, they could not be challenged before the Honorable Supreme Court. That means the power of the court to judicial review, to test the constitutional validity of any and every law which was put up in the 9th schedule was cut short through. That was the 9th schedule. Now, what happened was with First Amendment Act of 1951, we started by adding roughly, if I'm not wrong, 13 laws inside the first schedule. As on date, there are 284 laws which are there in the 9th schedule. But what has happened is that the courts, by the time 1975, 1977 came up, they were able to understand that the Parliament is using 9th schedule to bypass the judicial review. And that is where 1981 we had the Vaman Rao judgment, wherein the court said that any law which was put in before 24th April 1973, the Keshav Anand Bharti cutoff date, that wouldn't be reviewed, but anything after that would be reviewed. That would come under judicial review. Then we had the IC Collier case of 2007, IC Collier versus State of Tamil Nadu, wherein the court went one step further than the Vaman Rao judgment. They said, we are not only going to judicially review all laws put after 24th April 1973, we are also going to check their validity vis-a-vis the basic structure, and basic structure specifically being the golden triangle of the Menka Gandhi case of 1978, that is Article 14, 19 and 21. So that is where the Parliament's ability to change the structure or to fiddle with the soul of the Constitution, as which has been talked about by Pushkar and Swayam before me, all of that gets very limited. And that is where we hear a lot of jurists saying this, that the Constitution not just works for the people who believe in it, the Constitution works and sometimes works in a more proficient manner for the people who do not believe in it. And that is where the constitution as a living document gets more impetus in the current times which we are living, and as we plan for Amrit Kal, as we plan for a Viksit Bharat, that is where the constitution becomes the brick wall of preserving India's democratic ideals, as which has been stated by the preamble of the constitution as well, and every other right, specifically chapter 3 fundamental rights, specifically chapter 4 directive principles of state policy, and a couple of other legal rights. They are going to be a living memory of this fact. 50 years down the line, 100 years down the line, you won't be there, I won't be there, Pushkar won't be here, but our coming generations would know that there is this document which staged the test of time and which has created the modern nation state of Bharat, which we all are very proud of in the way it has taken shape.
Very well said, very well said. I really can't agree more on this. And केशवानंद भारती केस, हम समझते हैं अगर हमारे देश में अगर ऐसा केस ना होता तो आज शायद भारत जो हम देखते हैं आज कुछ और भारत होता.
Absolutely.
Cannot say better or worse, but definitely ये नहीं होता.
Absolutely.
That is for sure.
Correct. Totally correct.
Pushkar ji, what would you like to add on this remarks?
I find the notion of and the constitution as a living document very profound, especially with respect to the point that was made, because you see life can fructify and in several profound ways, but it can also undergo a premature termination. And what is important in this case is that the constitution and what the constitution did for India is that it brought together liberalism with a democratic state, because you see liberalism and a liberal order and democracy on the other side aren't invariably concomitant. So the challenge was, why were city states like Athens democratic but wider polity is not? There's a reason why when Magad conquered the Lichavis and the Vajjayan Confederacy was a confederacy. So they were spatially they were quite limited. In terms of who constituted the units, they were rather limited. Because it is always a challenge to bring together a lot of people onto the same page as far as any issue is concerned. So as far as the basic structure goes, the basic structure is the only safeguard we have against any conceivable scenario in which democracy and a democratic order becomes illiberal or it ceases to become liberal. And I think this is the beauty of the Keshwanand Bharti case and the concept of the basic structure. It preserves the essence of liberalism, it preserves the essence of progress and the capacity for progress, because you see, one also has to ensure that even if progress is frustratingly slow, we do not regress, because that's when cynicism will start to deeply entrench itself when one sees massive regression. And I think this judgment really is something that ensure that our democratic order will never become illiberal in the manner that several other countries have seen.
No, and adding to what he said, he made a very valid point about liberalism. So what does liberalism do? Jeremy Bentham and all these people, when they gave ideas like on liberty, when they gave the ideas of utilitarianism, they always said that the individual will be above any group, would be above any society. And that is where we saw almost all Eurocentric societies, almost all Western societies as on date, keeping the individual above themselves. And that is where a lot of internal fractures as on date are there in those societies which exist. Yet, even though the golden triangle which I just mentioned happens to be the core of it is individualism, the core of it is liberalism, yet it is bound by a wall of community rights. And that is where the opening line of the preamble, a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, read along with Article 14, 19, 21, then group rights like 25, 28, 29, backed by the entire wall of protection which is given by the heart and soul of the Constitution, that is Article 32, Supreme Court's writ petition jurisdiction, and Article 226, the writ petition jurisdiction of the High Court. All of these, what they are doing is they're creating a very beautiful confluence of the individual and the community, wherein the individual does not see himself as deviant to the community and vice versa. And that is where the community also knows that they have to treat every single individual respectfully. They have to bring them up. They have to create special laws if so be the need under Article 15 and 16, again fundamental rights, and they have to take the individual along till the last man standing, which is the idea of integral humanism, the idea of Antyodaya, which is again very beautifully envisaged under the Constitution. So this confluence of individuality and the group rights, the community rights, which comes together, that is what creates India. That at the core you have the individual, but beyond that individual you have a layer of society, you have a layer of community. Beyond that you have the layer of spirituality, if so to speak, and outside of all of that is there this major protective layer which protects not just the individual's right but the community's rights as well.
I completely agree with you what you have said. And you mentioned about socialist, secular, democratic, the nature of the country. जैसे आपने प्रस्तावना का जिक्र किया, preamble का जिक्र किया, और प्रस्तावना में बहुत साफ साफ लिखा हुआ है, हम भारत के लोग भारत को एक संपूर्ण प्रबुद्ध संपन्न समाजवादी पंथ निरपेक्ष लोकतंत्रात्मक गणराज्य बनाने के लिए. So we all are aspiring on those principles that we want to make India this India.
And that is where what the preamble is doing is the preamble is telling at the very start. What is the preamble? The preamble is the index of the Constitution. What it is telling it ki every single citizen is a stakeholder. No one is left out, no one is separate, and that is where the individual gets come. We is the individual, you and I. People of India is the community, and that is how it has to progress.
Right, very well said. And dear viewers, did you know? Surprisingly, there is no explicit requirement in the Constitution for the Prime Minister to be an elected member of the Parliament. He can be out of the Parliament and still head this 140 crore nation that stands at a plethora of cultures and diversities. And as we wrap up today's discussion on the Constitution, it is clear that this document remains not just a legal framework but a living testament to the values, struggles and ideals that shape our society. I encourage all of us to take a moment to explore the Constitution more deeply. आप संविधान को जितना गहराई से समझेंगे, आप अपने देश को उतना गहराई से जानेंगे. Read its words and think critically. How does it affect your day-to-day life and the world around you? And dear viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, continue to question and advocate for the principles of justice and equality. Until next time, I am Avinash Gautam, and this was Unlocking the Gems, Constitution Chronicles. Stay curious and keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.